first order of business on the agenda today is the annual election of the chair and vice chair of the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee. In terms of procedure, I will call for nominations for the position of chair. This will be done by way of motion. Once the chair has been declared, they'll take the chair at that time, and then they will take us through the agenda as well as the election for vice chair.
I'm going to cover that.
So at this time, I'd like to call for nominations for the position of chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I would like to nominate Councillor Richard Zarowski.
Call the motion.
Question?
Question?
Other nominations? Just
Well, we do on the nominations, we'll pass that. We'll pass a separate motion. But do we have a call to question for the nomination?
motion.
All right, let's put that.
So we vote? We vote?
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
All right, motion put and passed. Do we have any other nominations this afternoon? Do we have any further nominations? And for a third time, are there any further nominations that anyone would like to put forward to that council? There being none, I will declare Richard Zarowski as the new chair.
Yes, sir.
So we'll ask you to take the actual position of chair this time, and then you can lead us through the nominations for the position of vice chair.
So do you want me to take that?
We can take you right. I will see that.
I didn't bring my. Thank you. There we go. Thank you, David. And before we go ahead, I would like to have a round of applause and thanks for the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Tony Mancini, who has been an exemplary chair of the Environment and Sustainability Committee. And I'd like to thank him for his tenure over the last 2 years. And now you've got your hands full as Deputy Mayor, so.
So, respectfully, don't screw it up, so.
There.
All right, and thank you, David. So I'll begin with calling the meeting to order. So bear with me. This is my first time chairing this. So I guess the next order of business is to have the approval of the minutes.
Actually, we need a vice chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, election of vice chair. That's right. That was screwed up already, so I can't even follow your.
So we'll call for nominations, and if we'll call 3 times if there aren't any, if there's only one, and then we'll vote one.
All right.
I would like to nominate Councillor Sean Cleary as vice chair.
Second.
Okay, shall we call this to question and then ask for further nominations?
3 times we're required to ask, and then we're good.
Okay, so anybody else? Going once? Anybody else to be vice chair? Second time? Third time? Anybody for vice chair? So, looks like Councillor Cleary is in charge of vices. I couldn't think of a better person to do that. Congratulations. All right.
Now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes.
Okay, so I need a motion for the approval of the minutes.
I so move.
Councillor Blackburn has so moved, and Councillor Stretch has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. I think we had a call for changing the order of our schedule today. And
Sure. I'll put that forward, you wish.
I would like that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make two changes to the order of business today, if I may. I'd like to see the presentations, we have two presentations, and I'd like to see that come up next. And then following that, I would like to see public participation following the presentations, because we do want to hear from the public that are present today and their opinion on some of the agenda items. Do I have that two separately, David, or just two?
No, that's, we'll vote on that when we vote on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, David.
In addition to that, I would like to note that the clerk's office has received two added items, being item 15.1, which is a request for consideration from Deputy Mayor Mancini on penalties for legal dumping, as well as information item 3, air conditioner disposal at household special waste depots, all of which has been provided to members of the standing committee.
Do I have a seconding for Councillor Cleary seconds the Deputy Mayor's motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. I'm sorry, Councillor Hinsky.
I was going to ask Chairman for the clerk's assistant. There's also correspondence received with the plastics industry, but I got an email which was from the committee that
The correspondence that we have received with regards to item 8.1 on plastics, we have circulated before you today. There was also some correspondence that was addressed specifically to regional council on the item, so if there was something outstanding, it may be that it was, rather than addressed the standing committee, it was addressed to council or submitted past our deadline for circulation.
I don't want to show knowledge part of the process.
Mr. Chair, if I may, you're going to do that now, David. So the item 15.1 with regard to penalties for illegal dumping, the clerk's going to hand those out. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Okay, so any other additions and deletions that we should be aware of? If not, I guess we'll vote on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Any business arising from the minutes? None. Call for a declaration of conflict of interest. Motions of reconsideration. Any motions of rescission? And consideration of deferred business.
So I guess we'll commence with the presentations first.
Yes.
So that would be priority dumping item, getting plastic bags and HRM, Mark Butler. And you're welcome to either present up here today. I'll remind you that the microphones, when they're flashing green, that means that they're live, but you're also welcome to speak up at the podium if you like.
Okay, why not sit here?
Is that right?
Push the microphone. I don't have a written copy of my presentation, but I do have a letter that Dr. Tony Walker from Dalhousie recently sent to the Minister of Environment encouraging a ban on plastic bags in Nova Scotia. And I think also a copy to Councillor Mancini on that letter. So. I've my presentation reasonably short, certainly within the 10 minutes to allow for more opportunity for questions on this, questions and discussions on this topic. Are we good from an audio?
Maybe a bit closer for our folks at back.
Right, it is. Okay. Thank you for this opportunity, and also thank you for treating this topic with the seriousness that it deserves. My name is Mark Butler. I'm the Policy Director at the Ecology Action Centre, and we are asking you today to support a ban on single-use plastic bags. We appreciate that this is a complex topic and can be made to be, and also can be made to be a complex topic. But ultimately, we think a well-designed ban, drawing on experience from elsewhere, is the best option. As you know, and read in the report submitted by staff, approximately 125 million to 208 million bags are used in HRM. And plastic bags are one of the top 10 items found in shoreline cleanups. And I'm sure you've also seen them in ditches and in trees and in parks and across HRM. I won't spend a lot of time on the reasons for measures to reduce plastic use. You likely have heard and seen the growing negative impacts plastics and now microplastics are having on the environment and wildlife and ultimately ourselves. Frankly, today, if you study almost any food product, you will find plastic in it. You might have seen a study on sea salt which showed that 19 out of 20 brands of sea salt have microplastics in them. However, there are also strong financial and economic reasons to reduce our use. As a municipality, you well understand that more waste, recyclable or not, increases your costs. The same is true for businesses and citizens. Litter also comes with financial costs and economic impact. As a sustainable seafood lover, I am increasingly concerned about the hit that industry may take because of the ubiquity of microplastics in the oceans and hence seafood. We should also remember that using less plastic or any kind of disposable packaging reduces our GHG emissions. Staff have recommended a voluntary ban, and if that doesn't work, implementing a ban. I am unclear as to why we wouldn't go straight to a well-designed ban. If preparation and timing are an issue, let's develop reasonable timelines. I understand from the research that levies at the appropriate level and certain other measures can be effective, but I see no more effective action than a well-designed ban. And I think I mentioned this last time when I spoke. If something is important, we usually don't take voluntary measures, we take regulatory measures. We don't have voluntary speed limits, we don't have voluntary stop signs, we don't have voluntary fire codes, we don't have voluntary guidelines for child seats. These things are important to us, so we take measures to make sure they happen. Over the last year or two, there has been an incredible amount of media attention and growing public awareness about the problems of plastic and its impact on wildlife and ultimately ourselves. The corresponding response from governments, despite talk, has been surprisingly muted, except for a few notable exceptions. Those exceptions are municipalities across the country, and also, I would note, PI recently took action around bags. Yes, I would prefer that action was taken at the provincial or even at the national level, but if that is not going to happen, municipalities, please lead. I'm nearly done. I just want to say, with respect to the study conducted by staff, it's curious to me as to why staff didn't contact groups like ourselves, EAC, or Clean Foundation, or groups like the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, folks in the private sector have shown initiative like the Terra Shop and others, and get their input on this. And we're also lucky to have a fair amount of expertise in our local universities, and I note the research of Dr. Tony Walker, who was just actually, with some of the students and other researchers, put out a paper, which was recently published, comparing various measures to reduce single-use plastic and their effectiveness. So again, we have a lot of expertise in our community, and we should make use of it. So that's all I have to say at this point, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any, thank you, Mr. Butler. Are there any questions of clarification for Mr. Butler? Councillor Sargent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mark, for your presentation and all of the work that your organization is doing. You mentioned that it would be your preference if this was a province-wide adoption, and yet we have jurisdiction within the boundaries of Halifax Regional Municipality. And as much as you're here speaking to us today, our organizations such as yours not only lobbying the province to do just that, but are you also seeking out support from other municipalities, whether it be Colchester, Hants, etc. At the time you're speaking to us, Chair, thank you.
So on the first part of that question, we have been speaking to the province, to the minister, to the premier about this. We actually have a petition, petition that is directed towards the provincial minister, which I think is up to over 3,000 signatures, which we hope to deliver to the minister next week with the help of Santa Claus. So we are definitely asking, that was our first stop, we were asking the province to move. It's a good point about other municipalities. We have done perhaps less on that than we should have. I know the municipalities have been working together quite closely around EPR, and we really appreciate that, and that's always part of the puzzle too.
Former Chair, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, thanks for the presentation. You alluded to the staff not be contacting universities and your organization, private industry. Have you had conversations with organizations like the Restaurant Association, in those types of organizations, the Retail Association? Have you spoken to the plastic industry? Have you had any communication with those folks?
So, yeah, the answer, short answer would be yes. And actually, we had a workshop back midsummer, at which I think you were present, and we invited everybody. Joe Ruska from the plastics industry came down for it. We had Jim Cormier there. It wasn't meant to be necessarily, it was meant to be an opportunity for exchange and dialogue versus coming up with a statement which we would broadcast to the public. I thought it was good. I thought there was areas of agreement that I hadn't potentially expected, like, yes, if there is going to be a ban, let's make it provincial, let's make it consistent. However, if there's no action again from the province, then we would look for action from the municipality. We haven't, I think, spoken less to the Restaurant Association, but that's a good point. And we also, well, I made this point about HR and staff contacting us during their study. I make a point of contacting Matt, and he's always quick to get back to me, and we have good conversations in that respect.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Butler, thank you so much for your presentation. The EAC, of course, is a friend of HRN and the environment, and we value your input and your presentations, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. And perhaps I should mention, actually, we're having our open house today, 4 to 7, so you're all welcome, everybody.
A bit of a commercial plug. All right, I think we have 2 more presentations, just one. And that would be Andrew Deacon. Mr. Deacon, come forward. And I did forget to mention that when we do presentations that we like to provide an environment of inclusiveness so that people feel comfortable expressing themselves without support, without derision to the folks making the presentations. So thank you, gallery, for keeping that in mind. No cheers for or against for the presentations. Mr. Butler, Mr. Deacon, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm here today to tell you about a company that we're very excited about. It's EcoPilot Canada.
We need your microphone.
I am the commercial director of EcoPilot Canada, and I'm sometimes referred to as employee number 1. EcoPilot is an artificial intelligence advanced algorithm software package that is designed to extract free energy in the form of the thermal benefits and thermal capabilities of buildings. It's designed to integrate with buildings that are operated by a building management system or a building automation system. It utilizes the advanced knowledge that we have in the thermodynamic properties of buildings, real-time indoor data that is collected via typically wireless but sometimes wired sensors. It's armed with a very advanced local weather forecast, and it uses that knowledge and the algorithms and the AI software that drives it to offset a building management systems so that the building management system works from a completely different point of view than it was designed to from its starting or inception. It works from something called the building's thermal balance point temperature, and a lot of people don't know what that is, but we're going to give you a very brief introduction of balance point temperature in a short movie that will be part of this presentation. Our system is installed, as that note says there, in Beaverbank Elementary, and we have reduced their operating costs and their CO2 emissions significantly. The occupants of that building now talk about how pleasant an indoor environment it has, and we did that with an investment that took 1.7 years to return, and it's still in and operating today. EcoPilot is very new to people in North America, but it's not new at all. It's been in development for 7 or 8 years in Sweden from 2001 onwards. The AI and the advanced algorithms were developed over that period, and its first commercial installation took place in 2008. Since that time, 998 successful installations in countries all over Europe, and I'm proud to say, because of the investment by our company, now 2 buildings in this province and spreading rapidly, as you will hear shortly. While we're new to North America, we are as well known in our parent company or country and the countries of Europe as the word Pepsi is. We're in 2/3 of the 25 largest property owners' buildings in Europe. We're going to show you a short video that helps you get your head around the thermal properties of buildings. And I'd like to point out that this building has an excellent thermal signature. We practiced this earlier on. It did take a little while to load, but it will get.
Does effective building energy management matter? Energy accounts for... Does effective building energy management matter? Energy accounts for 40% of the lifetime cost of a building, and with a great indoor climate, you can increase productivity by up to 10%, as well as reducing sickness absence by 5%. EcoPilot is a smart add-on to your BMS that significantly reduces your energy bill, and the paybacks are fast. Theoretically, sensors can perfectly trigger your BMS to make harmonious reactive adjustments that optimize energy use. In reality, the hourly outdoor temperatures look like this. BMS systems can overreact with heating, fighting, cooling all day long. The drawbacks are an uncomfortable indoor climate with complaints from occupants and a requirement for highly skilled continual adjustments. Theoretically, sensors can perfectly trigger your BMS to make harmonious reactive adjustments that optimize energy use. In reality, hourly outdoor temperatures look like this. BMS systems can overreact with heating, fighting, cooling all day.
We're going to stop it because it's not useful to you. Unfortunately, I don't think the temporary setup here is good enough to execute the video without that terrible stuttering. So I'll do as good a job as I can in advising you on the thermal balance point temperature as they can. Let's take this building and its balance point temperature right now. If we were to send everybody home, shut the windows and doors, turn off the furnace, air conditioning and ventilation, over a period of around 200 or 300 hours, this building will settle at a temperature that is not rapidly changed by outside weather conditions. That is essentially the definition of a building balance point temperature. Without heating or cooling, the building, based on its thermal qualities, will settle at a point of temperature that will be grossly different than the outdoor temperature. Just hazard a guess that if we did that to this building, it'll settle at something like 12 degrees Celsius. And the reason that's important is because your weather changes rapidly, but your balance point temperature does not. You can go from minus 30 outside to plus 30 over a period of a couple of days, and it will not change the balance point temperature inside the building. Typically, you would need 200 to 300 hours to significantly change the temperature of a thermally strong or thermally heavy building. This is a thermally strong and heavy building. A wooden barn that's got holes inside of it that can't retain heat or cooling is a thermally weak building. So our product is designed to assist thermally strong or average construction buildings. If you know what the building will do in relationship to its thermal signature, then you can take advantage of what is the free energy that's generated by that thermal signature in the building. The building itself has a static thermal signature, and then we refer to fluid elements of the thermal signature, which can range from, if you fill this building with 1,000 people, the heat from those bodies will heat this building. If you cook from ovens in this building all day long, those ovens will affect the thermal signature in the building. If you have one side that's all glass and it's facing a certain direction, it will benefit from sun, and it will also benefit from wind and rain. As people go in and out of the building and leave doors open and windows open, all of those things will vary the balance point temperature of the building. Our software takes into consideration the thermal nature of the building, the manner of its operation, the timing and schedule of its operation, and then it seeks to drive the building's heating, ventilation and air conditioning components to take advantage of that thermal or free energy. In 1,000 buildings that EcoPilot is installed in, we have reduced energy savings by approximately 25% over those buildings, using a return on investment that is typically based around 36 months in time. And from those installations alone, we have reduced the CO2 emissions from those buildings to a value of 500,000 metric tons per year. We are proud to say the product does what it says it can do, and it works. It's been brought to this country or to this continent by our owners, and we are looking for partners who are interested in reducing their operating costs, improving their indoor climate, and reducing CO2. We would love to work with an HRN property to install the system at zero cost to HRN and to demonstrate how it can reduce your operating budgets and eliminate unnecessary CO2 emissions from HRN-owned buildings, or even where you are a major customer of a leased building by cooperating with you and the property owners. We're currently installed, as I say, in the Beaver Bank Elementary School. It's been running for since April of 2016. We're also installed in Coleswell Tower, just across the road, courtesy of Pondley REIT. We will shortly begin installation in 3 multi-unit residential buildings that are owned by Southwest Properties. We have requirements to install inside IKEA stores. Funnily enough, IKEA in Sweden and EcoPilot love each other. So
10 minutes, it's expired.
Mr. Deacon, thank you for your presentation. Any questions from Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had a quick question about how did you settle upon Beaverbank Monarch Drive Elementary School as one of the locations? I mean, that school is deep in the heart of my district, and I knew nothing about it, so I'm really quite fascinated to find out how you settled upon that school in particular.
I'll be careful with my answer, but that school was brought to our attention by the former Halifax Regional School Board, who were aware of a number of written complaints from occupants in that building, and just so happened that they had an energy engineering consultant who worked at that school. He's no longer there, and he was aware that we were bringing our product into North America, and we were asked, did we think we could resolve the issues with that school? I'll end with the answer by telling you that when school opened last September, media coverage about the children who were suffering in ridiculously overheated schools, that media attention did not apply to Beaverbank Elementary, and it's because our system was in there and it was working.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Sturridge.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation, Mr. Chair. I think I got more out of your speech than I likely would of the prepared presentation. But I'm missing, you say your product. What is your product? Is it a physical machine? What actually is it that you installed at the school? What is it you...
Do you have a smartphone on your desk?
Pardon me?
If you hold up your smartphone there,
This is it?
if we were to increase the size of that by 3 times its thickness, that's the size of the device that we currently install in a building. That device contains a hard drive with our software loaded on it, and then a gateway link to the network that runs the building management system. So the software is customized, purpose-built for every building that it goes into. And if you could see on a computer, which you can, what we call our dashboard, you would be able to recognise where the council support office is in this building and where the commissioners sit, and you'll know where all the sensors are in the building, and it will show you the heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems in the building, and you can drill down on that and you'll recognise it exactly as City Hall. And when it's installed in Cogswell Tower, you'll recognise it exactly as Cogswell Tower. So we take a base software product that has the knowledge of the algorithms in it, and then we custom build it right here to the buildings that we're installing it into.
All right. So for greater clarity, it's an electronic device that interfaces or interacts with the existing furnace, air conditioner, etc. It helps control those. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. You probably, as an organisation, have told your BMS that this room is in use certain days and hours of that day, and it's to maintain a temperature range that you've decided is a comfort range for this space. We will work with exactly those settings, and we will deliver this space in that comfort zone for whenever you say so. But we know, and our software knows, that these walls, once heated, will retain the heat, and they'll continue to make heat available. So if you put our software alongside the BMS on its own, the BMS will heat this until 5. If you said you wanted it warm till 5, ours will shut it off at 3 and know that it will not drop out of the comfort zone before 5. 2 hours of saved heating, you'll still have this room in exactly the condition you expected it to be in, but those 2 hours of energy will automatically and continuously be saved for you by the software.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? I'm just going to ask whether I can, I do have a couple of questions. Can I deliver them from the chair? Thank you. Okay, I'm just reading your overview here, and I haven't had a chance to go in great detail. And the first statement says the vast majority of buildings are thermally inert by nature. And I really wasn't familiar with that term, thermal inertia. So I looked it up, and it said those objects that have very little heat or do not receive heat from their surroundings. So it seems to be contradictory. I don't understand what that means. That's my first question. That means the building's framework has a self-regulating ability to maintain the correct temperature. To me, I just don't understand what that means. And then I go on to the third page, which talks about a measure of a building's heat inertia is the time constant. I don't know what that is, which is the quotient of the building's heat capacity divided by the ventilation and transmission losses. Now,
I see you're reading the white paper.
I have a master's in physics, and I'm not familiar with this. So, can you give me an explanation of these things? They don't make sense to me.
And I think it's unfortunate, and despite the comment to the contrary, I think you would have benefited from the video because it's designed to give a broad spectrum assessment of the thermal qualities of buildings, and quite frankly, most people don't understand them. And I see that you're reading from the white paper, which emanates from the Royal Institute, the KTH Institute in Sweden, which is where the academic research is done into the thermal nature of buildings, and it's what the software is driven by.
I just went on their website and looked for it, and I don't see any references here to any of the studies that they did that support this. So that would be my next
The
question.
KTH academic papers are separate and standalone, you're correct.
All right, thank you very much. Any further questions? Councillor Cleary.
Is it possible, where would we find that video if we wanted to watch it later?
It's on our website at ecopublicacademy.com.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Deacon. I know it's not listed, but I was under the impression that there was going to be a further presentation.
It's, we have that sort of listed on the agenda under a staff item that I would welcome if the presenter is prepared, if they want to, but we can also deal with that when it comes to staff items as well.
Okay, so what would be the preference, to have the presentation done now or do the staff item?
If I may suggest that my preference would be wait to have a staff presentation to bring that agenda item forward and move forward now with the public participation.
Yeah, okay. So, I guess we will have staff presentation.
Public participation.
I'm sorry, public presentation. Thank you for the correction. And
before we invite people to come speak, I'd just like to note that you were invited to come up to the 2 seats you have in front of us, and the microphone, when it flashes green, that means you're live, and each person has 5 minutes to speak.
could you come forward, please? State your name, where you live, and you have 5 minutes. And Mr. Cruz will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. Okay. Could you turn your microphone on? It's on? Bring it closer so that everybody can hear you, because the folks in the back won't be able to hear you.
I just have a couple of visual documents that I want to give to the two panels here on either side that relate to my talks, my presentations. I'll give them. Good afternoon. My name is Alan Collins. I'm a member of the CARP Environmental Committee. I should just explain what CARP means. Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah, good. CARP is the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, and we actually have a very active environmental committee. We're a bit smaller than the Ecology Action Centre, but we have been very active in on this issue. And I'll be speaking in favour of a mandatory ban, a regulatory ban, on single-use shopping bags. 3 weeks ago, the CARP Environmental Committee started an online petition on change.org to outlaw single-use plastic bags in Halifax supermarkets. It looks like this. We now have 350 signatures from Halifax, other parts of Nova Scotia and Canada, as well as from countries in Europe that face the same problem. Almost 2 years ago, this committee, the Environment and Sustainability Committee, passed a resolution requesting a staff report on options to reduce or eliminate the use of plastic bags, shopping bags in HRM. Since then, not much has been done except for more reports. During this time, countless plastic bags have accumulated in the city dump. Many of them have entered landfill or been blown into the ocean as litter. Despite new ways of recycling plastic in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, only a fraction of shopping bags are actually being recycled. Most shoppers in HRM continue to choose plastic bags over reusable ones because they're available for free and always have been. As proof, I submit this photo montage taken in 2 local supermarkets of shopping carts full of plastic bags on December 1st this year, showing that Halifax is a long way away from reaching a zero-waste system for single-use plastic bags. But there have been a few improvements. I've noticed that more people than before are carrying reusable bags, but they're still in a minority. Furthermore, the new recycled bags, such as this one I have in my hand, thinner than before and often have to be double bagged in order to hold heavy items such as jars and cans of produce. Now, it says right here on the bag, this bag contains 15% recycled content. That's very good, but unfortunately, that means the other 85% is made from new plastic entering the system for the first time. How can this be an improvement? If we take a voluntary approach to eliminating plastic shopping bags and engage in more studies, still more studies, we will be no further ahead at the end of the year 2020 than we are now. More tons of plastic will have entered the ocean. The best way to reach a zero-waste system in Halifax, which is what we're all aiming for, is a mandatory ban on single-use plastic shopping bags. If we abolish shopping bags, that will remove the biggest polluter from the system. This in itself will be an education to all members of the public who are currently unaware that these bags harm the environment or simply don't care. If there is a mandatory ban, we will not need to spend the $200,000 that the staff report predicts under a voluntary approach for an education fund to tell people about it. All supermarkets will automatically comply or face a fine. Failure to do so will incur highly negative publicity for the store. They will police themselves because it is in their interest to do so. Finally, there is a moral and spiritual reason for a ban on plastic bags. Sorry?
You have 30 seconds.
Oh, I thought okay. The Reverend Carl Wagner of Christ Church, Dartmouth, my church, has written an eloquent letter to members of this meeting. He says, we here at Christ Church, I'm almost at the end, give me one minute. We here at Christ Church, Dartmouth, believe that the fight against global warming and the problem of plastic pollution in the ocean are closely linked and will profoundly affect the kind of world we are leaving for our children and grandchildren. This is a moral issue, and for Christians, we see the stewardship of the planet as vital to living out the gospel of Jesus Christ. We call on the city of Halifax to set an example in protecting the environment for future generations. In other words, let's stop dragging our feet and put a stop to the flow of plastic issuing from our supermarkets right here and now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Any questions or clarifications from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. And do we have anybody else to present? Come forward, state your name and where you live.
Press this one.
No, it's great. Okay.
Okay, my name is Shalom Mandeville, and
councillors who don't know me from the past, we made presentations way back to 1996. I represent a North American-based scientific group in lakes, basically. We have two things now. One of them is very focused request. And I hope I've already sent you an email on that. So the ones I gave you now is nothing to do with that. We suggested that starting next summer, you start sampling for fecal coliforms in about 200 to 300 lakes. We have about 1,100 in HOM. This is because we as a volunteer group, and I was mentioning this a few times to Cameron DeKoff, who's in the Energy Environment section, that I received calls asking, Sean, is this like swimmable? You know, things like that. So you don't have to go to very expensive sampling, which took place in 2002, 2011, which was very expensive, close to $1 million. This one you can hire students to do in the summer if you don't have the staff. And I also understand the Department of Environment hires people to train younger generation. So you might be able to do it for free, except the samples for fecal coliform. And then you can put up the signs. Right now they do about 30 stations. And also, while we're at it, I just want to point out what Mr. Bob Bjerke, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name properly, the previous director of planning, he told this council, this standing committee in August 2017, that previous sampling was a waste of money because it did not lead to anything. And I agree with that. So I'm hoping you'll ask for a staff report on this. You know. My next thing is going back to my scientific stuff, which I gave you there. And I don't know if you're all aware of it. Powder Mill Lake, which is in Waverly, had a very serious toxic algal bloom in the year 2017. So the Department of Environment did close it for a while. The second one, I'm sure the councillors from Dartmouth will tell you, Bundup and Micmac had very severe problems last year, you know, about toxic algae. And Mr. Cameron DeKoff took a lot of leadership in that, and I take my hat off to him. I got to know him quite well recently. And then there was a fear that Otil Lake in Dartmouth, which is a very active group, as the Dartmouth councillors know, had quite a severe algal bloom, but it turned out it's not toxic. Again, it was Cameron DeKoff who got it done. So this trend is unknown in Nova Scotia. But where I come from, it's very common, as I said the last time. You know, and that's most probably due to high phosphorus levels, and also due to in the summer the lakes don't flush at all. And the last 2 years we didn't have any rain, if you remember. They didn't flush, and also it depends on you have the stuff. And I gave you that stuff from the World Health Organization, which is a very reputable organization, as you know, World Health Organization. It's based on phosphorus, water residence time, like how long the water stays in the lake, the pH, the sedgy transparency means the clarity, and the temperature. So this is for you to look at it yourself. By the way, I just stapled my card on it just to give you the website, and it's not to promote anything, we're not a business, okay? It's a volunteer group. In fact, I fund quite a few of the local activities from money I had saved a long time ago. And of course I live in an apartment, so I save a lot of money. So if anybody has any questions, I'd like to answer them.
Are there any questions from the committee?
So,
Thank you, Mr. Is it Mr. Mandeville? Your name?
Shalom, man.
Mr. Mandeville, thank you very much. Questions from the committee? If I may. Have you spoken, you mentioned you've spoken with council before about this?
No, council, it was mostly about what's called lake management and eutrophication, and those things I mentioned to council, not about the fecal coliform, no.
Thank you. If I don't see any questions, I would like to thank you for the presentation.
And I almost forgot to say, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you. And you as well. Yes, come forward to the microphone, state your name and where you live. See many familiar faces here.
So my name is Violet Rosengarten. Is that okay? Not too loud? Okay. I'm from Dartmouth.
Yay.
the,
I apologize, sir. Oh, sure, I apologize, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I'm an artist and an art educator, and I'm also an environmentalist. And I was one of the painters that did some paintings, plein air paintings, in the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes Wilderness area. And I was in 2 exhibitions at the Keshe Goodman Library, both last year and this year. And that was organized by the CARP Environmental Committee. So, I want to talk in terms of a regulatory ban on plastic bags, shopping bags in supermarkets. I'm also a member of Christ Church, and I happen to volunteer for the food bank at Christ Church. And so I do that for 2 hours every Thursday morning. Except that this morning it was about 3 hours because there were 75 people that came into the food bank this morning for food and clothing. Anyway, in my capacity as volunteer there, I help to register people that come in. And one of the things that I do is I tell them that Christ Church wants to move away from plastic, the use of plastic. So we used to pack all of their food in plastic bags from Sobeys, but we now want to move away from that. And I'm asking people to bring their own reusable shopping bags. And people are complying. The majority of people that come into the food bank now bring their own plastic, their own reusable bags. And some of them forget, and I urge them to bring them next time. So this is working. However, this is not an example of voluntary ban on plastic bags. I'm putting a lot of pressure on these people, and they're learning, and they're getting educated, and they're actually doing it. And I think that everybody in HRM could learn to do this too, but they're not going to do it unless we have a regulatory ban. And as long as plastic bags in Sobeys and Superstore are plentiful and free and convenient, people are going to use them. So I absolutely strongly urge you to vote for a regulatory ban on shopping bags in supermarkets. That's the only thing that's going to work. And I think that once people get into the habit of it, it's really easy. My family and I have been using reusable bags for many, many years. We just throw them in the trunk of the car, and they're there for us when we go to the superstore. And it's just super easy, and I think everyone can do it. But it's not going to happen until you actually ban them. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Rosengarten? Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for doing those beautiful paintings of Blue Mountain Birch Cove. I must say that my personal plug here is that I did my one of the paintings a year ago. And I recommend it highly to go to the Keshe Goodman, which is in District 12, not Dartmouth.
You brought all your colleagues Christmas?
We'll chat later. Thank you. Any further public? Come on forward. I see someone who's a stranger to these parts. State your name and your...
My name is Elizabeth Person, and I'm from Halifax and English. I was going to present to you today, but I got mixed up and didn't get a call, so I'm just going to get it quickly. I just wanted to read you something. I didn't sleep well last night and have not slept well since the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out in October of this year. When you really want to understand and take the time to see what the real scope of this crisis we face, it's almost paralyzing. And the average person doesn't really want to grasp this because they feel helpless. We need new, bold leadership and direction badly. You are not the average person, and this is not the average committee. And these times are not normal on this planet. If what the IPPC is saying is true, which I believe it is, we have 12 years, and that is our one and last chance, and it's lost. Forever. You guys are it. You have to be the hero counselors. You have to hit the ground running hard, and you need to run fast. We need all hands on deck, as nothing matters, nothing, unless we have a stable biosphere. You all will be here for 2 more years, and if you decide to run again, you will be here for 4 more. That's 6 of the critical 12 years. You have a daunting task. Never before in all the history of the city will people pay attention to whom was on this environmental committee. Never. Your task is daunting. There's 500,000 people here depending on you to change and protect the city and do it fast. When you go to a United Nations Climate Conference, which I have been to 3, you'll be so inspired and awed at what mayors in the world and councillors are doing to change this world. Because when you look at the globe and all the lights that are flickering, it's just a bunch of municipalities. Cities are leading the way, and can we say that we are? We can today with a full ban on plastic bags, and let us lead the way, which brings the public into more awareness and change, because that's what this is about. I'm personally worried about who you are passing this humongous responsibility onto. Who are the experts here? Last meeting, I heard about the Solar City project and how it was doing. 200 homes on Solar City is what I heard. With 500,000 people here in HRM is saying something is very wrong with this program, it's failed. The city seems to set their sights and visions way too low. And I believe this program changed when it started, and now it's harder on the homeowner, and also up the interest rate to 4.75%, and maybe it should be 3. It was a turnkey, and now it's not. So I recommend the administration take a hard look again at this program and how it's set up. And I don't know if you have this, but we really do need a climate change crisis planning committee to brainstorm and bring forward bold ideas to this wonderful city of ours, to your committee. I will help you. I hope you have this, but I don't know. This crisis is too big for all of you, and you will need all the resources you can get. So let's start with this bold ban on plastic bags today. Lead the charge. Our oceans need this desperately. Thank you.
Are there any questions or clarifications for Ms. McPherson? Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward and speak? Thank you. State your name, where you live.
Hey, my name is Kate Pepler, and I live in Halifax. I come today as a resident of Halifax and a small business owner. We know the facts about plastic. We know they're polluting our land, our waters, and severely harming our wildlife and are potentially harming us. This is not a time for voluntary bans. We need to take action now. The business I own is called The Tear Shop. We're Halifax's and Nova Scotia's first package-free shop. In our store, we offer no disposables, no disposable coffee cups or plastic bags, utensils, or anything. We've been open 2 months, and in the 2 months that we've been open, we've already saved over 4,500 plastic bags from entering the waste stream and over 2,800 disposable cups from entering the waste stream. And we're just one small business. Imagine if HRM, Nova Scotia, Canada took action and stood up for this issue. It has a huge impact. People will adapt, people will adjust, and in a time of crisis, this is a realistic and attainable thing we can do. Nova Scotia and HRM needs to be a leader in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pepler. Any questions from committee? Councillor Swetch.
Thank you very much. much for your presentation. Did I see you on the news last meeting we had?
Maybe. I've been very fortunate to get lots of media attention.
You have, and I'm sure you're doing a good job in your business success. You mentioned that you had, your business alone has diverted substantially the plastic bags, etc., from landfills, and you were able to do that on a voluntary basis? Nobody told you to do that?
Nobody told me. That's my business model.
But in your head, you knew it was the right thing to do?
Absolutely.
And without being forced or told, you alone were able to do that?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have more participation? Come on forward. State your name, where you live.
Hello, my name is Erin Burbage. I'm from Dartmouth, and I'm the Director of Programs and Regulatory Affairs with the Clean Nova Scotia Foundation. I'd like to speak to the motion around the single-use plastic bag ban today, and I'll keep my comments brief. As a long-standing environmental organization, the Clean Foundation is so pleased to see the committee taking leadership on the issue of single-use plastic bag reductions. While we feel that a province-wide ban would be a better solution and have written to the province to request as much, we believe that this is an opportunity for the municipal sector to take a leadership role in addressing the growing issue of single-use plastics in our waters. We support the motion before the committee today and recognize the positive momentum it would create. However, our preference would be to work toward an immediate ban, recognizing the pressing threat of plastic bags in our oceans. We are grateful for the actions of those businesses that have already stepped up to reduce or eliminate their dependence on plastic bags, but the time has come for decisive action from government. Thank you for this opportunity to comment and for your attention to this issue.
Questions for the committee? Thank you. Last name is Burbage? Burbage. Thank you. Anyone else? Calling? Good. State your name and where you live for council, please.
My name is Tony Curry. I live in Halifax. I am an employee of the municipality, but I'm not here in that capacity, just as a resident. And because it's an issue that I think is important, so I wanted to come in and encourage the council to ban, depending on single-use plastics as much as possible, with bags. That's what we're talking about today. I've lived in a number of jurisdictions and done various things, Ontario and elsewhere, and we only have to look at the garbage, open your average garbage bag or go to the dump, and you'll see that such a huge portion of it is single-use plastics. They're incredibly hard to recycle and expensive to recycle. Plastic bags get used for something like 12 seconds on average, from the store to the car, and then from the car to home, and then the same thing until they end up in the garbage. And there's just in today's day and age no reason not to go to a ban or a fee that encourages the use of recycled or sustainable materials and so on. We didn't have plastic bags. Looking around the council, some of you may be old enough to remember when free garbage plastic bags weren't available at every supermarket, and yet still somehow seniors managed to do their shopping and we managed to feed ourselves without this huge volume of garbage that we as a municipality have to deal with, and it's not cheap to deal with either. So yeah, I would much rather both live in and work for a municipality that's on the cutting edge of fixing this kind of problem, as opposed to being dragged along kicking and screaming. So for those reasons, I'd like to encourage you to think seriously about banning single-use plastics as much as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Are there any questions? Councillor Hensby.
Thank you. On your quick cycle of garbage waste, 12 seconds from the store to the car, to the home, and under the counter, and
extract oil in order to make the bag. And then when we have the bag at the end of it all, we need to do something with it. They don't decompose. They sit for years. They can't functionally be used over and over again the way a canvas bag or a otherwise reusable bag can. So yes, we have extraction problems at the beginning, and then we have disposal problems at the end, neither of which are necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Any further questions? Thank you very much. Are there more speakers? We have a very busy Environment and Sustainability Committee this month. Please state your name and where you live. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Jim Cormier, Planning Director for the Retail Council of Canada, and live in the fine community of Dartmouth. Councillor Mancini as my councillor. Sorry.
I failed to see a point of order here.
I will say on the side, Councillor Mancini's doing a fine job. Just here, obviously, on behalf of the retail sector, when it comes to this debate, retailers are most associated with single-use plastic bags, rightly so. Everyone from our grocers, we represent the grocery sector. We also represent small independent mom-and-pop shops, right up through to some of the largest general merchandise retailers in the world. Retailers have been working to try and develop a harmonized approach on this issue for a number of years. Back in 2017, our members got together in Montreal and we came forth with a harmonized approach. Basically, when it comes to chain retailers, harmonization beats just about everything. They'll often say, even if there's a piece of legislation that they don't like, it's still better if it's harmonized with other pieces of legislation that they don't like. That's one of the reasons why on this issue we've pushed so hard for provincial legislation. We're not opposed, and we put that forward in our letter that we sent a few weeks ago. We're not opposed to looking at lots of different options. We just like them to be harmonized to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, when we look at the staff report, that hits it out of the park with regards to our number one preference, which is to mandate that businesses develop individual plans on bag reduction. That said, I do understand that there are opinions around this council chamber table that would like to see more. That's why we've been very careful to show that we are not opposed to other actions, whether it was the province putting a fee on the bags. We're not opposed to that. Further down the list of preference, but something that we can work with, is a bag ban, which again can be done by municipalities, not our preferred approach, but something we can work with. But given the fact that the province has shown over the last number of months that it seems to be unwilling to act, we'd simply ask that if Halifax decides to move forward with a ban, we'd ask that you please work with Federation of Nova Scotia Municipalities, other municipalities on their own, if not through the Federation, to ensure that the process is as harmonized as possible. I'll mention that I have spoken with Councillor Mason in his role as well, and we've talked about this as well. So, I just simply want to point that out. Generally, our members, they just want to serve the public. The general public calls for an ability to move their product from the store to their vehicles and to their homes. Whether that's plastic, whether that's paper, whether it's multi-use polypropylene, woven polypropylene, whether it's bringing their own cotton bags, there's an environmental footprint in every single one of those products. We get that. Again, we just want an ability to be able to serve the customer, not needlessly upset them, and help do our part to help work for change. The worst case scenario would be having a mishmash across Nova Scotia, similar to what we have in the province of Quebec, where with all of the different municipal units there, there's about 17 different forms of doing a bag ban based on thickness, not based on thickness, you name it. We'd rather avoid that. So we simply ask for a harmonized approach, but understanding that the staff report does coincide with our #1 preference. At that point, I'll simply turn it back over if there's any questions. Thank you.
Questions for clarification? Thank you, Mr. Varney. Is it Varney?
Cormier.
Cormier. My apologies. I've got cabbage in my ears. Councillor Stretch.
I saw that cabbage. Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Cormier, for your presentation. We did have written correspondence from you. So what I'm understanding is that you, no different than a lot of the other speakers, are looking for a provincial solution, not necessarily a patchwork that may be or may not come out of a recommendation from this committee. You mentioned that you have been working with the province, but there doesn't appear to be any update. What is the feedback you're getting? Why, if this is such an important issue to so many people, why does the provincial government not see fit to enact this and, as a result, put municipalities in a very awkward position as it relates to many jurisdictions across Nova Scotia?
Well, I'd be loath to try and speak on behalf of the province, the provincial government. All I can say is that there seemed to be momentum as early as this spring for provincial action, and then that stopped. And you know, the message we've been getting is simply that they are still interested in the issue, but you know, that's about as far as they've been willing to go. So again, we just don't want to have that situation where you have neighboring municipalities. And I know Halifax is in a unique situation where there's not too many neighboring municipalities that are of a certain size, but you know, neighboring municipalities that all have retail and having 3-4 different sets of rules for the people that are shopping in all of those communities. They're probably not going to go and yell at their local councillor. They're going to yell at the student who's pumping the cash register and, you know, express their frustration that way. We'd rather avoid that and create as seamless a shopping experience as possible. And, you know, if we had a level playing field from Amherst to Yarmouth to Sydney and everywhere in between, that would be preferable.
One further follow-up. If indeed, regardless of what comes out of this committee today, that would be a recommendation to regional council. If regional council did decide to support and enact what staff are referring to and put a voluntary ban in place, would your membership be prepared or willing to help us spread that message if it was voluntary to allow people to understand what may or may not be at stake?
Our members have done that in other provinces. You know, in previous years in Ontario, Quebec, they've done the voluntary approach. Generally, it's worked well. You know, obviously there are those that can point to holes in the process. You know, there's never a perfect system. You know, for instance, I know some of my members, some would have participated more heavily than others. And that is a problem with a voluntary process. I'm not going to try and deny that. That said, you know, it's generally seen good results as at least a good first step. You know, and those provinces were ahead of us, frankly, with that. And so now after doing that for a certain number of years, they've moved on to other approaches.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No questions? If I may, if it's all right with the committee, I would like to ask a couple of questions. I'm a little taken aback when you say it's worked well, voluntary bans. I'm not aware of our current circumstance with single-use plastic in the oceans and the environment as working out well in any stretch of the imagination. Can you sort of explain to me what that means?
At least from a statistical point of view, and you know, I apologize, I don't have those numbers with me, but you know, we could provide them if you wish from our National Environment Committee. Some of the statistics of, you know, provinces like Quebec and Ontario, before before the voluntary reduction plan was put in place versus X number of years later, what were the reduction numbers? Showed that there were good reduction numbers. Is that going to have an impact on the amount of, I think you're speaking more globally about the amount of plastic in the oceans. Well, we're specifically speaking about single-use plastic bags in provinces like Quebec and Ontario. That said, are there other options? Sure. Again, we're not trying to put this out there to say, here's our stake in the ground, and, we won't be willing to work with anything other than position X. We've shown here that we have a number of options where we're saying we can work with Halifax, we can work with other municipalities. We're just saying we're willing to be a part of the process.
Okay, I was just curious about that statement, and I don't see any evidence of it, so I guess we're on opposite sides of the fence there. Mr. Cormier, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And if there are no further questions, you're free to go, and we'll see if anybody else has any comments. We don't have rebuttal from the audience on presentations, by the way. So you can come up and speak, but we don't entertain question and answers from the audience. Your name and where you live, please.
Can you hear me? Caroline McPherson, I live in Dartmouth.
Caroline
McPherson?
McPherson, okay.
Okay, just quickly, I want to know, if you guys choose to do the voluntary ban, how many signatures, because I am now drafting up a petition, an old-fashioned petition that people can sign, and it's going to go all over the place for the municipality. How many signatures do I need to put on your desk if you guys choose to do voluntary ban?
You can make a presentation, but this isn't an address to the committee. You can talk with staff about that. But this is a place to make your presentation, not to question or grill the committee.
Okay, I just,
Okay.
if there was a certain amount of numbers or not.
Again, you can make a presentation.
Okay, that'll be next time. Okay, I just would need to know if there's numbers or not, so.
If you can, questions about specifically petitions like that, you can speak with the clerk's office and they'll be able to clarify any requirements for submitting a petition.
Okay, perfect. That's awesome. That's all I want to know.
For clarity, and I don't want anybody to think they're being cut off, and the process sometimes can be confusing. I appreciate you coming up, and I think what I'm hearing is that you obviously support us going further than this, and how could you help make sure the committee and council understands that a lot of people other than you support that. So today we've heard comments from two groups, one with a petition of 350 names, and I think Merck maybe mentioned 3,000 names. The population here at HRM is about around 450,000, so 350 or 3,000 are very small numbers as it relates to 450,000. So I can't speak to what anybody else would feel is significant, but small numbers like that, although they do indicate support, I would think that hundreds of thousands would really hit the message home. And if you're able to do that, then power to you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stretch, and perhaps that points to, process is sometimes a bit daunting and difficult, and understanding what the parameters are of that. We want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard and speak in this and get their opinion put forth to committee. On that note, are there others who would like to come forth and speak to council? Calling once. Are there others who would like to come forth and speak to council? Or committee? Get my turn on. And third and final call for anyone who would like to speak to committee. Can someone close the... Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. So we're going to be talking about the single-use item reduction strategy. I believe we're going to have presentation first.
The motion on the floor first.
You want to put the motion on the floor? Would someone please do that?
I'll be happy to do that, Mr. Chair. The following motion on the floor that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee recommends that Regional Council direct staff to 1, collaborate with the industrial, commercial, institutional, and ICI sector to develop a voluntary waste reduction strategy for the consumption of single-use items focusing on plastic carry-out bags, utensils, cups, containers, straws, and other waste items that may be identified through this collaboration, subject to approval of the necessary program funding as part of the 1920-21 budget. And 2, initiate an education campaign for residents in the ICI sector, focus on the reduction of single-use plastics. 3, consult with industry, internal stakeholders, the public, the Regulatory Modernization Advisory Committee, and the development of regulatory framework required to prohibit the distribution of single-use plastics in the Halifax Regional Municipality. Should the initial voluntary approach fail to achieve acceptable results by December 31st, 2019. And 4, review and update the 2009 HRM corporate guidelines for greening meetings and catering requirements. So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary, for seconding.
Chair, I do believe maybe a presentation, if colleagues would like to see that from staff, and we could do that, then I would speak after that.
Is that acceptable? All right. Do we have staff here to make a presentation?
Thank you very much. My name is Shannon Niedema, and I'm the Manager of Energy and Environment with the municipality. I'm going to co-present with Matt Kelleher, who's the Manager of Solid Waste. And this is just a brief overview of what's contained within the staff report under discussion right now. So just a little bit of background. The report responds to 2 separate motions of council and committee. The first was a regional council motion in January of this year, calling for staff to explore ways to reduce plastic shopping bags and to promote extended producer responsibility within the municipality. And the second was a motion of the Environment, Sustainability and Standing Committee on to ask staff to explore the reduction of plastic straws within our community. There was a previous report tabled in January responding to those motions, titled Options to Reduce or Eliminate the Use of Plastic Shopping Bags in the Municipality. So we all understand that plastics are an issue from local all the way through to global scales, and I'm just going to speak briefly on each kind of level. So internationally, in Halifax in September, there was a meeting of the G7 Ministers of Environment, Oceans and Energy hosted in Halifax, where they discussed climate change and plastic pollution and discussed the Ocean Plastics Charter. Some details in the report talk about a United Nations Environment Report dated 2018, which discusses the impact of regulatory bans of plastics, not just bags, but single-use plastics. And the conclusion was that it's still a little too early to tell to be able to measure and report on the effectiveness of the bans that have happened so far, and that there have been mixed results for various reasons. Bans address some symptoms of overuse of single-use plastics, but the report calls for long-term solutions to be a key area of focus. In Canada, there was a national survey conducted by EcoAnalytics to try and understand public environmental concerns. The top 3 concerns that were listed through the survey relate to plastic pollution in our oceans, so we understand that this is of great concern. 65% of respondents agreed that governments should take action around single-use plastics in the form of regulation. One of the things that was announced at the G7 in Halifax was the creation of a circular economy leadership coalition in Canada, with members such as IKEA Canada, Loblaw and Walmart Canada, and Unilever Canada. And the vision of this coalition is to make Canada a world leader in building a sustainable, prosperous, zero-waste, low-carbon emitting, circular economy that benefits the lives of people at home and abroad. This is kind of an exciting development nationally to see our industry leaders step up and start to take serious committed action looking holistically at the issue of plastics pollution. Also, Canada is in process right now of developing a framework for a zero plastic waste strategy through consultations with provinces and territories. Within our province, we know that we use about 300 to 500 million grocery bags every year, and that they make up about 3% of the total litter observed. And 41 of 50 municipalities have made motions in support of a distribution ban and support of a province-wide approach, as well as support for extended producer responsibility legislation. Do you want to speak to the municipal context? So Matt will take over from here.
So within the Halifax system, we collect and we process and manage our single-use plastic bags. Right now, approximately 400 tons of that material comes into our recycling facility and it's diverted from landfill. Ultimately, that makes up around 1% of the material that ends up at our recycling facility. So we process around 28,000 tons of material annually at our facility. And some of these single-use plastic bags make their way to the landfill because they're used for garbage, or unfortunately people do not recycle them. And that number right now, based on a recent study through Divert Nova Scotia, who did an audit of the Halifax landfill as well as all landfills in Nova Scotia, that number was approximately 90 tons in Halifax as a representative figure. So out of the material that was audited, 20% of what made its way to the landfill was plastic. And out of that 20%, 1% of that was plastic bags, so it was a very small fraction. Staff completed consultations with stakeholder groups. It wasn't a very broad consultation, it was very focused. I was part of the Ecology Action Center consultation that Mark held, and it was very insightful, and our team also went out and spoke with other members in the community, and that's detailed within the council and the ESSC report. The focus from that consultation was that businesses are adapting to consumer demand, and we see that through certain retail outlets reducing the amount of plastic in their single-use plastic bags, some retailers charging for single-use plastic bags, and other retailers just not providing them. And at the end of the day, everybody has the ability to ban them themselves by bringing their own cloth bags or other means to take their products. One of the other key areas that was brought up during the consultation was the red tape reduction strategy that was approved through an administrative order by the Halifax Regional Council. The HRM Charter of Governing Principles for Regulation Administrative Order number 2017-0002 ADM outlines a number of the requirements that staff need to address before bringing a regulation to council. And one of those was that a regulation should not be the first instrument of a policy when there's other policy alternatives available. So right now we're seeing alternatives to regulation in the Halifax market, but also throughout North America. And through that there's public-private partnerships, there's eco-friendly alternatives, there's social awareness and public pressure campaigns that we see through just residents going in and questioning why they don't have, why certain organizations are continuing to hand out bags. There's voluntary reduction strategies that are being implemented by residents and businesses, and there's voluntary agreements that businesses are signing with municipalities in order to reduce the amount of material. So with the voluntary agreements, what we've been able to research is that in Ontario, when they move forward with voluntary single-use plastic bag reduction strategies, the plastic bags reduced by 70%. In Manitoba, it was approximately 70%, and Quebec, it was approximately 50%. And in Australia, just recently, the two major grocery chains within the country started to reduce the amount of bags that were handed out, and that dropped the use of plastic bags by 80%. So building on the momentum, in HRM we are seeing a shift. A lot of that shift is from our residents demanding changes from businesses, and those businesses are changing in order to get that business. Recently, the CCME has put out a strategy on zero plastic waste, and what their ultimate goal is for the waste per capita in Canada to drop from approximately 700 kilograms per person to 490 kilograms per person by 2030, and down to 350 kilograms per person in 2040. Halifax has already met those achievements already. Our diversion, our tons per capita right now is around 310 kgs per person in Halifax as a residential component. And if we bring in the construction and demolition material, the industrial, and the IC&I sector, it moves up from around 310 kgs per person to approximately 380 kgs per person. So we are still very well ahead of the game in terms of waste reduction nationally. So because of this momentum, and the administrative order, staff are recommending that we move forward with a collaborative engagement with the business community. One of the main reasons for that is we need to, in staff's opinion, look beyond just the single-use plastic bag. We've heard from some of the retailers that they like us coming in, working with them to reduce single-use plastic bags. If that's instantly regulated, they may not be as open to looking at straws, looking to plastic cups, looking to styrofoam, in lieu of anticipating regulation. We feel that we'll be able to get more reduction in single-use plastics by a collaborative approach than a single-use plastic bag ban. And that's our quick presentation.
Thank you, Sharon and Matt, for the presentation. Now, calling for questions. I see Councillor Cleary has his hands waving at me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick questions. So you had mentioned just a few seconds ago 310 kilograms per person. Can you just, I didn't see that on the slide, so I missed what you said there. What does that refer to?
So that's through you, Mr. Chair, to the council. The disposal rate per capita in Halifax right now is 310 kilograms per person annually. That makes its way to a landfill.
Of all single-use plastics, or is that just bags?
That's all waste. All waste. It's 310 kgs, and the national average right now is 700. The CCME target for, I believe it was 2030, was 450 kilograms per person.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is with regard to process. So one of the alternatives is that we could bring in a regulated, mandatory ban on bags. In terms of their distribution, can you just walk me through exactly, you would have to draft a bylaw, so what is the mechanisms that we would use? I'll give you an example. When we switched to, the municipality switched to clear plastic bags, it took a long time for vendors to actually, retailers to have those available in the quantities and that sort of thing. So if we ban them, what is it exactly the legal mechanism that we use to make that ban possible? Like, do we have security guards posted all on the border of HRM and no plastics allowed to come in? Like, how does that actually work?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, my understanding would be through a bylaw, and that bylaw would identify the single-use plastic bags that would be unacceptable, and then there would likely have to be some exclusions to permit certain single-use plastic bags to be used. For instance, your fruit and vegetable bags, or the bags that wrap your chicken. Those are what we see in some regulations as acceptable single-use plastic bags that are outside of prohibition. Ultimately, the bylaw would be enforced by compliance officers or the police. I don't think that there would be a barrier put up to residents out by the municipality, no checkpoints for plastic.
And so I know in the report, we talked about this before, one of the other options too, of course, is to have a fee placed on single-use plastics, particularly bags, say 5 cents a bag, that kind of thing. And I know in here you, and I'm talking to Mr. Cormier previously about how that those funds would be managed, and I see in here, if we go ahead with the voluntary ban, we're looking at maybe $200,000 in cost to us for education, management, all that kind of stuff. So could this also be done in concert with for those other plastic bags that might be required, a fee as well, and would we get some of that fee for cost recovery for the program?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, HRM is not able to apply a fee on single-use plastic bags. It's a provincial jurisdiction on that, so we don't have the authority to move forward with that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking for a quick update from Matt on where do we stand with China? Last I heard, China is no longer taking our plastic film, our plastic bags. There was some discussion at one point that we were going to temporarily burn them or have to burn them. Where do we stand with that now?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, approximately this time last year, January, we were in a position where we had material that we didn't believe we'd be able to move, and we requested through the operator's permission from Nova Scotia Environment to dispose of that because there were no markets available at that time. Since then, we did not have to dispose of that material. We were able to move it. There are challenges with the global markets right now, oil prices being one. When oil prices are low, it's cheaper to get new plastic than it is to recycle and repurpose plastic. The other is that China and other countries are now banning the importation of plastic and many other recyclable products, which is making it challenging for all municipal run operations, not just in Nova Scotia, but Canada and globally to move the products. Halifax, through our partners at the recycling facility, have continued to be able to move all of our products that get collected and processed at the facility. We have not had to landfill any product material, and we're one of the very few that can say that at this point. And a number of municipalities are starting to move away from collecting certain recyclable materials because they end up in a landfill. Again, Nova Scotia and Halifax is unique because we have a ban on these types of materials, and we have to ultimately, regardless of the cost, find a home for them rather than put them in our local landfill.
So just to clarify, we have not found a stable, continuous buyer for this product.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, we have a number of semi-stable outlets to move our material, and I say semi-stable because of the ever-changing economic environment that we're in. And if we stay even in the country where we're moving these materials to a province or a city, there will be a number of operators who will start hunting for that specific recycler to see if they could undercut the price that we are getting or we are paying in order to move their material from their municipality. It's always been a very competitive market to ensure that we get the best value for taxpayer dollar, and now with the challenge with moving these materials, it's even more so.
So would an outright ban, that would have implications on bottom line? I mean, that would reduce the amount of money that you have coming in from selling this product, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the council, with regards to single-use plastic bags and film plastic in general, it's not a money maker. We have to pay to have that recycled. One of the things that we're moving forward with now is looping that into the circular economy locally with Halifax C&D. They are taking our material and using that and a lot of Nova Scotia material to process into plastic planks. and then those planks are then made into picnic tables and chairs through Lake City Woodworkers. So they're using local labor and circular economy to move the product forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Stretch?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Shannon and Matt. So, no matter which direction we go, it's going to help. And I appreciate where you're coming from. You referenced other jurisdictions that have enacted voluntary bans have 70% success rates in some cases. So I have to believe that if the burden you have now with the plastic bags was reduced by 70%, that would go a long way. I was also encouraged to hear you say that a lot of these bags are now being used to make plastic planks, which I have talked to people about recently, and I think that's a great opportunity. But to a point that was made a little earlier, and I'd like you to pick up on it, Councillor Hensby had asked one of the presenters where they thought the disconnect was. So if you're going into a store and you're getting your stuff in a plastic bag, you bring it back, you put it in the recycling bag, it gets to you, and you're doing all the right things with it. The problem that I see is people that on the way home throw it out the window, and it ends up in the ditch, or it ends up, in a catch basin or something like that. So I'm not sure if that really was identified. And I think, Councillor, that's where you were going. We have a lot of dirty people that just don't know any better than to throw things out the window, and that bothers me immensely. I think the work that you're doing is very good, and I think regardless of where we go on this, we're going to help in one way, shape, or form. I'm also very interested, or I was interested when you talked about the charter, and that the first line of attack is one of volunteer, of encouraging our people to be part of the solution and not to further exacerbate the problem. So I want to thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Chair, we're not speaking to the motion right now, is that correct? We're just
asking questions, we're not into the motion.
Well, for now, that's all a clarification, but I appreciate your presentation.
Okay, Councillor Mason, you'll speak to the motion. Okay. If I may speak again, I do have a question. Something that hasn't been defined for me is what is plastic. We talk about this stuff that stays there for thousands of years, and every once in a while I read a paper that says, great, we have the cellulose substitute that will biodegrade. What's up with this? And as soon as we look at recycling plastics, we've got 3,000 different types. They all have different uses, different constructions, different lifetimes. Can you give me a thumbnail sketch of, is it possible to have cellulose-based bags that will decompose, and not decompose into plastic microbits, but is it possible to look at some other alternative to plastics? And indeed, how we define plastics. I know that comes from oil, but certainly there are edible oil products which we get. Why can't we get something that microbes like too much? If you can sort of, maybe this is too much for the nature of the science of this thing, but I'm kind of curious about this, how we got ourselves into this, because cars were supposed to be a solution to horses in cities 120 years ago, and now cars are a problem. I guess plastic was the same thing. We were going to get away from all the ills of disease that afflicted us with shopping stuff, and now we have this affliction called plastic. So, can you help me out here?
Yeah, I think it's in page 2. No, just kidding. Just quickly, I'd say you're right. There are thousands of different types of plastics, and that's one of the challenges in trying to recycle those plastics is coming up with a standard end product that can use different types of plastics. Ultimately, what I think we've seen is that businesses will create a plastic or type of plastic for the benefit of their product. And whether that is to make sure that it gets to where it's going without getting broken, or it increases the longevity of the food that it's being stored in, ultimately that is what is driving the multiple types of plastics. I can't really speak to the chemistry part of it, but maybe Shannon can help me out.
Mr. Chair, just to respond a little bit, focused on the circular economy. First of all, staff are hesitant to paint plastics as bad because a lot of plastics, when we're not just talking about plastic shopping bags, are life-saving, they're required, they're essential to our current society. And when the G7 was here and we participated in listening to the expert panels from industry, scientists, engineers, leaders globally, there were some really interesting developments around the recycling of plastics infinitely. So there's a plant being built in Windsor, Ontario, that is intended to perpetually and completely recycle polystyrene. So the industry is actually showing intense leadership on thinking outside the box and thinking more in the closed loop system on some types of plastics, just as an FYI.
Okay, and one further question. In all this talk about plastics, we really didn't talk about its greenhouse footprint. Alternatives to plastic, that kind of thing. Can we speak to with greater efficiency to the greenhouse, since climate change is a major concern, and everything seems to come down to this common denominator that climate change in the end is what's really going to bite us in 10 years. And reducing plastic isn't about just the pollution of the plastic, but could you speak to its greenhouse gas footprint, please?
Mr. Chair and the committee, the previous report in January of 2016 outlined in detail the life cycle costs of plastic shopping bags, single-use plastic shopping bags, in contradiction to the cloth bags and other alternative and paper bags. So there are details in that report, which I do have here that I can pass to you after. But I think the take-home message in the report was that as long as you use a cloth bag between 17 and 99 times before you throw it out, it has a lower life cycle cost than a single-use plastic bag, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Wonderful presentation. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Shannon. Councillor Mancini.
So I'll speak to the motion if I may now.
Yes, please.
First of all, Matt, thank you very much. Our waste management system is the best in Canada, and Matt and his team is responsible for that, and thank you very much. To you, Shannon, and your team who worked on the report, along with Shannon Betts and Lori Lewis, thank you for your work on this file. I truly appreciate it. I think worthwhile, Mr. Chair, if we kind of go back a little bit to how we've come to be here today. It's interesting, we have asked the province, and we've heard that a couple times today, to implement a ban on single-use plastic. We've asked the province to also implement extended producer responsibility. We've asked the province to do a lot of things, and a few weeks ago, in 1 week, it was a tough week because the province responded by saying, no, we're not going to do a ban on single-use plastic, with very little explanation, which is very frustrating. And in that same week, we were told, no, Halifax Regional Municipality, we're not going to allow you to lower the speed limits in residential areas. It was a tough week. It was a tough week for this municipality. This municipality is the largest municipality in Atlantic Canada. We're the economic driver for the province of Nova Scotia. And I value our relationship with the province of Nova Scotia. However, it's been very difficult. And I truly wish they would just allow us to run this municipality as the way we know better, and in fact, respectfully know better than they. We have a charter we have to follow, and we realize the problems. We've asked for many amendments to that charter, and so here we are today. And I've heard, the small plastic bags is a small percentage, and you're absolutely correct. It is a small percentage, but it is something we can grab a hold of. It's maybe low-hanging fruit for municipalities, and we can grab a hold of and do something with it. So regional chairs are part of the committee that I belong to. That's the municipalities across the province that manage their waste management programs. They lead their environmental issues, each municipality. The province had told that committee, we'll look at extended producer responsibility, we'll look at banning plastic bags if you all agree. Well, guess what, folks? We all agree. All of the municipalities in Nova Scotia agree, but we still got a big no from the province on that. I know that we're fortunate to have Councillor Mason here today, who's the newly minted president of Nova Scotia Municipality Federations. Congratulations. And he'll speak to it also. And speaking with his colleagues, there's great agreement to look at banning single-use plastic. So today I think, a great conversation today. Thank you for everyone that spoke today. Really debating, do we go take a voluntary approach as recommended by staff, or do we take a regulatory approach? My concern with the voluntary approach, and even though we heard Mr. Cormier come up and talk about his members can choose to do whatever they wish. They don't have to follow suit in any direction other than something directed by the province or each municipality. So my concern is you're not going to have full participation. I'll be honest, I have a concern with a regulatory approach also because we're telling a citizen something you can't do, and that's always tough. All we have to do is look at our nuisance bylaw, and that's in reference to where you can smoke or can't smoke. Not a lot of people, that doesn't back it up. However, it is what it is. So that's a little bit of a concern. What I like about regulatory, though, is it eliminates the option. I think one of the speakers talked about it. So if I go to Costco right now, I know there's no plastic bag. And there's no option. So if I get a container, I either pile it all into my cart or I take one of their cardboard boxes. There's no option. And many times, many of us will take our cloth bags and forget them at home and go, oh, darn, I forgot them at home. Well, we'll give me a plastic bag. So there lies the problem. There lies truly the problem. Many cities, many countries have taken on a ban. We've had full countries taking on a ban. PEI haven't looked at that full ban. We had the G7, as mentioned by a couple of people here today. So the top 7 environment ministers of the world were here in our great municipality, and the topic was protecting our oceans and the issue of plastics. And out of that, they came this Ocean Plastic Charter to reduce single-use plastic bags. You know, HRM, we referred to HRM for a long time as an aging population. Or what does the chair say? Your future challenge. Future challenge, as he refers to himself as future challenge. But you know what? This municipality is getting younger. We have a huge growth between the ages of 20 to 39. And there's many reasons for that. Because we are providing opportunities for our youth, because our university students, our international students are able to stay here easier than before, because we're creating a municipality that's more walkable, it's bikeable, working on the transit piece, but we're working on that piece to be a reliable transit. But that same age group are very conscious of the environment. That same age group get it. That same age group, when I speak to university students and high school students, says, what the heck are you guys doing? Just ban the darn things. They get it. They get it. I want HRM to be the lead, once again, when it comes to these types of things. So when we look at the recommendation, and I respect the opinion of staff on a voluntary approach, but I have those concerns. So when we look at the motion that's in front of us, I will, first of all, Mr. Chair, like to break out the motion if we can, when it comes time to vote. And then my ask to my colleagues here is to turn down the first one, which looks at a voluntary approach. Number 2 is education. We still need to do education regardless of what we do. Then the consulting with industry in case the regulatory approach is not necessary, because I would like to replace number 1 with a regulatory approach. I do have, when it comes to that time, when we come to, so my ask is to vote down number 1, vote for number 2, vote down number 3, vote for number 4. Well, number 4, by the way, and thank you for staff for bringing that forward, is update the HRM corporate guidelines for greeting meetings at HRM. I think it was, Jennifer Watts brought that forward. that meaning that our meetings, we don't have plastic jars and we don't use styrofoam. We've gotten away from that, to be honest, so I'm glad that that's coming back. And then I do have an amendment to that. So I'm going to allow the discussion to take place, Mr. Chair, and then after that we can call for the vote, but I am asking people to vote down number 1 so that I would vote down the number 2 as an option.
All right, so the process is, we can speak to number 1, or sorry, we'll speak to the motion right now as it stands, and we will break out each section as a separate vote, if that's all right with staff. And I see Councillor Wayne Mason has been waiting very, very patiently.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good work today. Thanks to the committee for allowing me to participate today. I think it's the first time I've ever spoken at environment and sustainability. I've been in the audience a couple times.
Well, in that case, we can't let you speak.
I was asked to come by Deputy Mayor Mancini to complain him. I'm here to support a regulatory ban on a voluntary ban on plastic bags. I'd like to thank staff for their work, but I have a little bit of context that I think will make it easier for this committee to make a decision. But first, personally, I support the work that's been done. I thought we've done great work in the city to reduce waste going into landfill, and that's great. But I think that, as some of the speakers spoke about, plastic going into the biosphere is separate from waste going into landfill, and I think that we need to address that. I think the plastic bag ban is critical because simply what you're talking about trying to force a change of behavior that we've been trying to do in this community for about 15 years. And as you know, Councillor Mancini, Deputy Mayor Mancini brought up, you don't have bags at Costco. Well, my neighborhood stores, Liverpool Superstore, just downstairs from my house. We haven't had bags there for over a decade, and it works. So the 3 things I want to share with you are as president, first is, as president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, as Ms. Meanwhile said, 41 municipalities have individually supported EPR, extended producer responsibility. But in addition to that, a resolution to support implementing EPR was passed at the Federation's annual general meeting last month. EPR is important, but I support from the reservation because it impacts all packaging on everything coming to a store. But personally, I see plastics and single-use plastics that aren't necessary as a separate issue. The second piece, which is NSFM related, is that starting about a year ago, the regional centers working group started meeting, and that's mayors from the 10 largest regional centers throughout Nova Scotia. And they are CBRM, Port Hawkesbury, Antigonish, New Glasgow, Truro, Enfield, Amherst, Bridgewater, Yarmouth, and HRM. And I got to attend as Deputy Mayor, past Deputy Mayor, after Mayor Savage. And because this is a relatively new group, we were looking for something to hang our hats around. And so I'm here to tell you that in November during at the NSFM AGM we met, and all the mayors agreed that they will ban plastic bags this year in all of those communities, which represent 67% of the population in Nova Scotia. But they need Halifax to do it first. Simply put, you're not going to be 45 minutes or an hour away from Halifax and say, yeah, we're going to be the one to ban it from our Sobeys, but they can still drive into Dartmouth Crossing or wherever to buy something there, and they still have plastic bags. So that is in train right now. The suggested date that they have is a soft launch on July 1st with a hard ban by October 1st, but that's negotiable. For this meeting, we ended up deciding, pretty much everybody said they're going to bring a simpler bylaw to their council. It's not a guarantee it's going to pass. It's the mayor saying that they're going to take it to their councils, but I believe it will pass in all of those communities and 68% of the population of the province, and a vast majority of places where you go to shop and buy stuff will ban plastic bags. And what's interesting about that, of course, is that it would probably lead to a provincial ban. And then the third point, I didn't know Jim was going to be here, and I'm going to say it anyway, but Jim Cormier just said from the National Retail Council that they want a provincial ban. The next best thing is the 10 regional centers and 68% of the population banning the plastic bag. I completely understand what he's saying, but not wanting to have a whole bunch of different regulations. I think it's important there is a willingness for us to coordinate and work together on this throughout the province and try and drive that. But one of the things that I really want to point out here is, as Deputy Mayor Mancini said, we're always going to the province asking for more powers. We control this. This is something that municipalities control. So by working together, we can implement a province-wide ban or a nearly province-wide ban, an effective province-wide ban, without waiting for the Minister of the Environment and the legislature to take action. This is within our control.
opportunity for Halifax to lead, as we have in the past, on things like pesticide ban, composting and recycling, where the rest of the province has all of this. I'm confident that with Halifax and the regional centers taking the lead, other municipalities, and hopefully with the provincial government will also. So thank you very much. I hope that helps. I got to run out already for the next meeting, but I hope that helps this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Appreciate that. Councillor Stretch, I believe you were next in line.
I am next in line, and I just want to clarify, because I heard that Wayne Mason said he was in support of the voluntary ban. Maybe we missed
Regulatory.
Regulatory, not voluntary.
Yeah, regulatory.
I guess first and foremost, I want to tell you how it warmed my heart to hear somebody as important as the deputy mayor call out our current provincial government on a few issues. Tony, that really did. That made me feel good today.
Someone said once, careful what you wish for.
I take them where I can get them. I want to be part of something here today, I really do. And this is my second appointment to this committee, and I guess by virtue of the fact that I'm here again, maybe I'm a reborn environmentalist. It's taken 20 years to get me to this point, but slow but sure, here I am. I did not, when the original motion was at the committee, support getting here. But now we are here. Now we have something in front of us that even I can vote for. I'm afraid that if we go, and I think what I'm hearing you say, Deputy, is that really you don't want us to do a voluntary ban, that we don't have faith in our people to take this to the next step, that we're going to tell them what they have to do. I'm not sure I can buy into that. And correct me if I'm wrong, if in fact we change this motion and we go to regional council saying we want an all-out ban, this disappears. So council then has to say, just correct me if I'm wrong, we support that or we do not. So if in fact that was voted down, then we did nothing. Is that fair to say? Am I right or am I wrong, Chair? Because I thought this would go to council with a recommendation that we want to do something else. But if what we want to do is different than this, is that what council is going to vote upon? Yeah, and I'd ask you,
it's important to respond.
It's very important, because you may end up with nothing. We're a pretty close group here, you know, as it relates to supporting what's in front of us. I'm not so sure all of our colleagues would be prepared to go that far. I am prepared to vote for this. I want to support the motion that's on the floor and that was seconded by Councillor Cleary. I don't believe I'm part of the problem. I don't believe the majority of our residents are part of the problem. I go into the grocery store and I buy things once in a while, not very often, but once in a while. Marion will give me a list and I'll go in and get a few things. But I can tell you the day will never come when I will walk in with a bag, so I'll take out whatever they have. But I can tell you, I do not throw it out the window on the way home. I don't put it in the water. I mean, Shalom Mandrigo mentioned in his last presentation to this committee how clean the waterways are in the Muscataway Valley. That doesn't happen by mistake. It happens because the people of that community are stewards and of the waterways and understand the importance. It bothers me to no end that others don't feel the same and are forcing us into this position. I think our staff have done a good job bringing this forward. I am prepared to give our people, our residents, an opportunity to rise to that challenge. If in fact, like some of the presenters, the young lady at the restaurant said she was able to do on a voluntary basis so many things, you know, just in her small capacity, I think there is an opportunity for our people to step up. I would like to give them that chance before we force something on them that not likely would be as well received as if we asked them to help us. So that's kind of where I am. I appreciated Shannon and Matt's perspective as it relates to the experience of other municipalities. I mean, 70% diversion from a voluntary approach is a lot. That is a lot. And we're already ahead of the game down here. I was at a conference a while ago, not relating to this topic, but it was technology. But there was someone there from the Ontario government, and numerous times they cited how Halifax was ahead of the curve as it relates to our diversion and our success in that field. So I would like to be able to continue on that. I would like to be able to be with this committee in solidarity as it relates to this, and I can hear. But I can tell you, if it changes and it's an all-out ban, I can't support that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's not very often that I disagree with staff, but this is one of those days. I very, very much appreciate Matt and Shannon your work on this, and understand where you're coming from, but we need to go further. The deputy mayor mentioned that it's a small percentage, but 300 to 500 million plastic bags a year in a province as small as Nova Scotia is no small potatoes. And, I understand where they're coming from with the red tape reduction, that it is heavy-handed, bans when other alternatives are still available, but let's face it, China put us in a precarious position. We cannot count on a single, stable, sustainable market for this product. The education piece. How's that working for our issues with crosswalk safety? Sometimes education just isn't enough. I want you to take a moment and think back to the 1980s. Remember when we all discovered that aerosols were destroying the ozone? Now you got to remember, the 1980s, that was deep in Aquanet years, kids. You had to get the hair as high as possible with that hairspray. We adapted. We found new products that did the same thing, and we changed our behavior. The ozone has since recovered. Well, some of us lost our hair in the ensuing years, but we don't talk about that. I am very disappointed that the province is not moving on this. The ideal, absolutely, would be provincial, as opposed to a patchwork quilt of regulations. But in the absence of that leadership, as the largest municipality in the province, the ball's in our court. And we can't wait. We have read the reports, we have seen the timeline, 10, 12 years. That's not a lot of time. We have been a national leader when it comes to waste reduction and how we deal with waste here in Halifax. And I think it's on us to continue that trend. We're ready. And finally, I can sum up my feelings on this simply by saying, when you have the opportunity to make change for the better and you don't do it, you're really no better than those who simply don't care. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Man, I have a lot of mixed feelings on this issue. Unlike Councillor Stretch, who said he doesn't feel that we're all part of the problem, unfortunately we are all part of it. You're part of the problem. I'm part of the problem. They're part of the problem. As a species, we're lazy, we're selfish, we're stupid. If we weren't, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in right now. Individually, we can try to do our best. Unfortunately, collectively, we never ever do our best, and that's part of the tragedy of the commons. If, looking at the report, if we are using at the high end here 500 million grocery bags in Nova Scotia, so the extrapolation for Halifax is at the low end, 125 million bags. Each bag is about 5.5 grams for polyethylene bag. So looking at the report, there was 1,530 tons of film plastic that were processed through the MRF. So if you actually do the math, that's 687 tons from those plastic grocery bags, and we were only processing 382 tons of them. So that's like 306 tons just on the landfill. Probably wrapped around diapers, dog poo, all the rest of it. So most of it, or a good chunk of it, half of it almost, ends up in landfill anyway, even though it's not supposed to. And the other part of my mixed feelings on this is, and I'll just put it right on the table, I'm in favor of a ban, an outright ban on plastic bags. I'm in favor of an outright ban on all single-use plastics. I'm in favor of a ban on almost all plastics. I would rather carry a 5-pound iPhone in my pocket made entirely of aluminum than having all the plastic that we have in everything from this microphone to my belt to my shoes to everything. You mentioned, Councillor Stretch, about how we're stewards and how clean it is out there. It's actually not. Pretty much every single one of our rivers, our lakes, and every area of our ocean has microplastics in it. Whether those are microbeads, whether they're pieces of lint that come off your fleece sweater, or they're degraded plastics turning into microplastics going out through our environment. They're everywhere. I think we heard, maybe it was from Mark or someone else, talking about how all the fish have plastics in them, how everything we eat has plastics in them. Not very far from now, we'll have more weight in the ocean of plastics than we will have of living things. And as been said, and I'll reinforce, our provincial government has failed us and is continuing to fail us on the environment. And I say that knowing that we are one of, hopefully still a handful of provinces willing to put a price on carbon, although we've gone to a cap and trade system, which is completely idiotic. Carbon tax would have been more efficient. But nonetheless, we are where we are. Mr. Kelleher mentioned some fantastic data on our waste system and how we're doing better than everywhere else in the country. But that doesn't give me much hope. So there's about almost half a megajoule of petroleum in an average plastic bag. So if you think about the 520 bags that we're all using at the high end, 500 million bags, that's almost 100 million kilometers of driving that we could do in Nova Scotia in the petroleum that's in the plastic grocery bags that we use. 100 million. If you extrapolate that across Canada, 19.2 billion bags used, that's 37 million kilometers that could be driven from petroleum in the plastic bags that we use. In Halifax, I was part of the council, but you went to clear plastic bags, so now you got to go buy special bags for your garbage. And here we are going to ban other bags that you could use for your garbage to make you go buy clear bags for your garbage. And that's a problem we're going to have to solve at some point in time, because we're making you buy bags to put your garbage out. And there's no good solution to that, because if you just put it loose in the garbage can, it's going to blow everywhere. We'll have more plastic in the ocean. So we completely screwed ourselves, people. I don't feel good. Whatever we do here, I don't feel good about this. The only thing that's going to change in those 3 R's that reduce, reuse, recycle is reduce. We consume too much. Stop consuming so much. I'm trying, we're all trying, we need to try harder. You don't need all those bags. You don't need all the plastic. You don't need 5 iPhones, and you don't need 18 pairs of shoes, and you don't need 28 shirts. Stop buying so much crap. Amy Leonard, who is an amazing person, has done a number of great educational videos over the last decade on our consumption, and particularly in plastic. And if you look at how much stuff that we end up still possessing a year after purchasing it, it's about 1%. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hensby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As the only councillor present here today that was there when the council first brought in solid waste strategy, bringing in the green cards, we had a revolutionary change of waste reduction across this municipality, and adopted a lot of other municipalities since it's been going on 20 plus years. And it seems to be working, but it's not perfect. And we still have people throwing organics and mixed waste and everything like that, and it's going to take time to educate, try to get people to do the right thing. So my only concern though is I'd rather take the voluntary approach in regards to working with industry, working with the public, doing the communications, but I'm also curious about this. Should the voluntary approach fail to achieve acceptable results by next December? Well, my question is, what is the goal in regards to acceptable results? What is that? what is that tangible mark going to be? Is it going to be not one plastic bag of pitch, not one plastic bag of water? I'm just kind of curious, what is that goal? What are we trying to achieve there with the one-year voluntary approach?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the council, with the time period that's put forward of a year, the anticipated outcome is to ensure that we are in as many supermarkets, grocery stores, retail outlets as possible, and that the industry embraces this change. We anticipate coming back to council likely near the end of next year, early 2020, with the results of the businesses and industries that we've engaged to be allowed in to help them reduce the amount of plastics within their operation. And if that's a very low number, then it would be a position to regulate single-use plastic bags. If all of the industry players and businesses accept our help and we are embraced wholeheartedly and we see some reductions, we will bring that back to council, and if it will be up to council at that point if that meets your threshold of success, and we will move in whatever direction we're directed.
And the further question in regards to we don't have the authority to tax bags, but we have the authority to regulate the use of bags. How like one seems to be contrary to the other in regards to you try to control the amount of bags by encouraging a taxation or levy or charge on them. You can't do that. But the stores are possible to do that as an in-house thing. But we're trying to read through our regulations. On what authority do we have? Where do we want to put in a mandatory ban, a regulatory ban? What authority, what gravity do we have to enforce it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, under the Halifax Charter, we don't have the authority to tax or impose a fee or levy on the bags. Under the Charter, and I'll defer to the solicitor if I step out of bounds on this one, is that we have the ability to regulate the use of a product in conjunction with our solid waste strategy, which is utmost importance to reduce, reuse, and recycle. So under the guise of the reduce piece, we have that authority under the Charter to ban plastic bags.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my concern is that I always hate to be the person that dictates and like to collaborate and work with communities, work with people, work with industry. You know, I would have hoped the problems would be provide more leadership here. I think that perhaps if we did take a voluntary approach and give them time, that we have a year to try to do our best approach. In years' time, say, well, this is what we did. This is how well it worked or how well it didn't work. Then that would put more pressure provincially. If the Federation of Nova Scotia Municipalities are waiting for us to take the one giant leap and everyone follows step, that could possibly be done within a year's time. Because as the province says that any changes that to the municipality, they give us a 1 year's notice. Perhaps we should give the province a 1 year notice. Perhaps if they don't take initial steps, we'll take a lockstep and go forward. As stands now, I'm prepared to support all four motions as it presently are.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? If committee will let me speak, I would like to speak from here. This is, it's just been bad news all around for the environment for the last year. We don't seem to be able to make any traction anywhere we go. We've got greenhouse gases that continue to climb. We just read another report that in Canada and globally, our greenhouse gases have yet to peak. And we were told by the scientific reports that we have a decade to act, maybe a year or two to plan. And everything Councillor Cleary said was absolutely correct in terms of the seriousness of how this is all interconnected. And here we sit with another half measure to mitigate something that requires a full measure. And with all due respect, we have no time left to act, to make a difference, or we don't have a future. And it's difficult to tell business, no, you have to do it our way. You've got to get rid of this. It's difficult to tell our constituents, our citizens, the residents of HRM, we're going to make another rule for you. You can't do this. In addition to, you can't smoke over here, you can't drive this fast, you shouldn't drink while you drive, you gotta wear your seatbelts. We're becoming a very regulated world. But the truth of the matter is there's too many of us. There's too much consumption, and we wouldn't have to regulate things if we didn't have so many of us. We're pushing 8 billion people on the face of the earth. And we are in the Marie Antoinette chair. We consume more than anybody does in the world. We have historically consumed the vast preponderance of the garbage and CO2 that afflicts our ecosystem. And so when you read about polar bears dying, turtles ingesting plastics, stomachs full of plastics in whales that beach, hundreds of tons per person per year of garbage going into our landfills, or even burning it. That's what the Chinese did. We gave it to the Chinese, we sold it to the Chinese at $16 a ton, and they took it and burned it. So we wind up creating CO2 in the atmosphere, along with furans and dioxins, all kinds of nasty things. So I want us to do something. I want us to regulate. I don't think voluntary works. It's the same thing as clean water, clean air. If we leave it up to the auspices of business and voluntary commitments, the commons become a waste. And you just have to walk through Blue Mountain, Birch Cove, any day of the week. You're pulling out plastic cups, coffee cups, garbage bags, even mattresses. Someone had decided to dump a lot of household waste on there. So I'm not going to go with the voluntary collaboration. We don't have time. We've got to act. So that's what I have to say. So I guess the next thing is for us to decide how to break this up.
If I could close, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to answer Councillor Stretch's question, and it's a good question of clarification. So you look at the motion has 4 parts to it, right? What I ask here today is that we break it down and vote one at a time. We vote down number 1, and we vote yay for number 2, vote down number 3, yay for number 4. And if you go to your package, Councillor Stretch and others, go to page 16 of the report, you'll see the 2 alternatives that I asked to replace number 1 with alternative number 2. So there is action coming out of here. For people watching at home and want to hear today, whatever we decide today does not become law. We still have to go to regional council, just to clarify that, right? So that's the page 16, and it would be alternative number 2, which is to that in communicating with the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities to start this by July 2019 with an option to phase in over 3 months, which will take us to October the 1st. So moved.
All right. Discussion?
Sorry, thank you.
Would you like to speak to the motion first?
Yeah, just clarification. So we're talking, we're talking bags as opposed to. Right. So it says plastics, and I'm just speaking of bags. And this is single-use plastic bags.
just take a moment to ensure that we get the procedure on.
Yes, I think that would be, behooves us to do that, so we'll just take, we've been here for 2.5 hours, can we take a 5-minute break and be back, make it 25 to 4, and hopefully we'll have everything in order and be able to proceed.
Sorry, I was going to call the other way. We're called the paper in school.
Still recording, maybe tape over the mic. That's brightness. This is volume for music. Right here. It was down. It was. When I hit the button, it said muted. But I don't know if that's just sound that comes out of this.
There's other ways.
council to see what you guys recommend.
Never again. Okay.
So we would put the alternate one before, to begin with, and then another.
Rich, are you getting this figured out?
No. I'm just going to be looking at.
It's getting a little late, isn't it?
Yeah, Heritage Advisory's coming in at 5. What's that?
I know.
It is about climate change and hot air.
Well, this is just like long enough, Richard. I might have to start to believe some of this stuff.
Oh,
It's a good company.
you're giving me chest.
They said it's the big one.
I'm coming.
Only those of us with a certain age will understand that one.
All right, folks. If we can- Okay. Sarah, please do it. I'm Richard. Do I have a name in front of me? All right, so could you- Thank you very
Oh, yeah, everyone?
I can write if there's any climate Okay.
We eliminated yesterday. Well, I
Good luck.
fully digital. Yep, so I'm, I was very oh my God, I edited it now, and no more crawling up telephone poles and looking stuff. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's come such a long way. That's awesome. Yeah. And so now you'll just take this with an SD card. SD card, I'll plug it into my iPod. Send it via. So do you still have like full editing suites? We do. I don't. So that knows that you need to pay yeah. The camera guys who work on the big cameras. Right. Yeah, I was going to say, because back when I worked there was a guy who would come with you on the story, do a shoot. Yeah. And that still happens once in a while. And then there'd be an editor back at the station. Only maybe 2 or 3 actual just editors.
That was great talking to you all about this.
Camera guys, they cut their own stuff, so they don't go into it. There's certain things that and now the editors, would they strictly just be doing news, or would they be doing commercial production as well? There's people design commercial production. They just do that alone. Yeah, it's much so new people have to get paid. Yeah. Well, I remember that used to be the joke when you'd see oh my God, well you'd have, if it was TV and radio, you would have, exactly, so you'd have English, and so there'd be the reporter, the camera person, and sound tech, and so you'd replicate that for English and French. If it was radio, then you'd have the reporter and the sound person, like, wow. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they do all the time. Pamela's back and do a TV piece. She'll do a web story, maybe not, depending. And she'll kind of break it. It is.
Sorry, folks, it's going to be another few minutes until we hammer this out. So far, there hasn't been any bloodshed, but... Now, we're going to leave the stains on the carpet. I'm going to start on this end over here. Lots of those water cups. So what have you got here? In the interests of okay, if we can just grab our chairs, and David and Sarah are trying to work out the logistics of this. Tony, you neglected to tell me you know, for the last 2 years, nothing has happened, and the first time you get me in the chair here.
So that was for the voluntary, but it's for the education.
So we're not voting
Correct, so the band kind of does go.
so now
You don't know.
to accept.
Yeah, gotta do the work. Yeah.
I just wanted, there was fear that I was too quick on her. That's why.
Nope, it's free.
Figured you were good.
He did mention that.
Sorry, HEMDC, is that for the community counseling? So that's called an amendment. Yeah.
Yep. I think it's going to.
All right, Mr. Chair, Mayor, put the motion back on the floor so we clear that.
Could you please?
I'd like to put the following amendment on the floor. Direct staff to collaborate with the 10 largest Nova Scotia municipalities and to draft a bylaw for council's consideration as soon as possible, but no later than December 2019, to eliminate the distribution of single-use plastic bags without first attempting a voluntary approach. So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Councilor Stretch?
I don't really know if there's anything left to say. So really, where we are is where I didn't want to be, so now I'm going to unfortunately have to vote against the motion that's on the floor. I understand the nuances that have been brought forward by all members of the committee, and it's disappointing to me that we have not seen fit to give the public on a voluntary basis the opportunity to step up to the plate. But what disappoints me the most is that HRM is being forced by the provincial government into this position. This should be an all-for-one, one-for-all approach where all of Nova Scotia is either in or out. So now we're unfortunately going to head down the road of a patchwork approach where one municipality may do this, another may do that. We have our neighbors in Colchester, in Hants, etc. I'm not sure where they're going to want to go. And, so if I go to Sobeys in Elmsdale, I'll be getting plastic bags. Am I even allowed to drive back over the border into HRM? When I do, is Matt even going to take them? I don't know. Or if I go to Truro. So it's going to put us all in a very difficult spot. We, once again, will take a leadership role, albeit begrudgingly on my part, one way or the other. But I think it's going to be important as this issue gets to a regional council that the options still be on the table, because regional council may not agree with what this committee has recommended today. And if in fact the provincial government can get their act together before that, wouldn't that be the best situation for all of us? Anyway, unfortunately, I will have to vote against the motion, Chair. Thank you.
Councilor Hansby?
Just to read the motion, I assume it's the 10 largest municipalities on the population base and not geographical territory. It's one thing of clarification. Secondly, though, who are those other 10 large municipalities? Because what happens if one of those 10 municipalities cannot get concurrence of its own council to move forward? Does it nullify this motion? You know, it is absolute that all 10 have to be in concurrence with the municipality for 11 out of 50. Or the municipalities, I'd like to know in regards to, we're hitching our wagon to the other 10 municipalities, and one or more should not fulfill its expectations here, where does this put its motion?
Councilor Nancy, would you like to speak to that?
I think Councillor, unfortunately, Mason is the one who'd be best to speak to that, because he's the one that has spoken to those 10 municipalities and had agreement. Their charter is can be a little different in each municipality, as I understand it too, so that may be complicated. But, so I don't know how to answer Councillor Hansby. I know that Councillor Mason had that conversation with those 10.
Thank you, Deputy. Is it possible to get the motion up on the screen?
Which I can't set my computer up there, but I see what I can do.
Would you like me to just read it again? Why don't you read it? I'll read it slowly for you, Councillor. Sure. Okay. I could email it to everybody, right? So it's once again direct staff to collaborate with the 10 largest Nova Scotia municipalities, so it's collaboration, and to draft a bylaw for council consideration as soon as possible, but no later than December 2019, to eliminate the distribution of single-use plastic bags without first attempting a voluntary approach.
If committee would agree, I would like to speak from the chair. I understand your motivation, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think we're not going far enough in this. I would have liked to have deleted the bags. I would have liked to have deleted the 10 municipalities. I think we have our big boy pants on. Am I allowed to say that, by the way? Big girl pants, big boy pants, whatever you want to say. I think we're the dominant municipality in Eastern Canada, and we have a different charter. I think we need to take care of ourselves and let the other municipalities and other jurisdictions do what they want to do. I think this is going to present a difficult, it's quite watered down from what I would want to see. I want to see us go harder and do more and get plastics out of here, not just single-use shopping bags or bags, and not consulting yet again, because that is part of the problem, that we spend all this time talking and no time doing it. However, I am going to support this, because it's, as much as I am the enemy of doing something as opposed to doing what you need to do, gosh darn gee whiz, oh shucks, I've got to do something. So I'm going to vote for this. So, if there's a call for question has been put forth, all those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Hansby, in favor?
Not in favor.
Oh, you're in favor? Okay.
Like I say, there's some of the problems why I approach.
All right. So, 4 to 1 vote. Motion's been passed. Are we through with this? Okay. Well, and I wish the deputy mayor had informed me that it would be so much fun sitting in the chair. Now I need to take a look at my, lost my, here we go. So what's up next?
So we come back, I'd just like to make a quick note, we only dealt with the presentations for item 10, but I would like to note correspondence and both petitions.
All right. So do we have correspondence and petitions?
Yes, the clerk's office has received correspondence related to item 8.1, as well as other correspondence which has been circulated to members of the standing committee.
Any petitions?
Yes, I do have one petition today. This has been submitted from the members of the Canadian Association of Retired Persons Halifax Environmental Committee, and it's a petition containing 344 signatures requesting a mandatory ban on plastic shopping bags.
And any further presentations? Okay. And so this takes us up to the 12.1.2, the 12.1 on-site energy manager efficiency Nova Scotia. Oh, it has been deferred. All right, so then we'll go to, do we have to vote on that? Okay. councillor appointment for the Nova Scotia Solid Waste Resource Management Regional Chairs Committee. So would someone like to put that motion on the floor?
I'll put it on the floor if you wish, Mr. Chair. That the Environment Sustainability Standing Committee, one, nominate one member of the Nova Scotia Solid Waste Resource Management Regional Chairs Committee for a term of November 2020, and nominate one alternative member of the Nova Scotia Solid Waste Resource Management Regional Chairs Committee for a term of November 2020. I guess I'm suggesting that the chair be the primary person, and I'm prepared to do the alternative.
Second motion.
Any discussion? Question?
Clarification, sorry, is the vice chair on that alternative?
Yeah, I believe.
No, there's no stipulation of who can be the alternative, but it should be a member of council, so anyone can be,
Where were you? Question on the motion.
Question on the motion has been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? And thank you. Could we close the door? Sure. Thank you. Members of Standing Committee, none. We have a motion. Can we have a motion for the 12.3.1 Regional Watersheds Advisory Board? Motion, could we put that?
I'll move that the Environment Sustainability Standing Committee request staff to prepare a report considering one strategic partnership with voluntary groups and monitoring the water quality of Halifax municipality rates, collecting baseline data to investigate water testing equipment. So the connectivity, temperature data, CGD, instrument for multiple parameter testing. 3, activating the green network connections that use and approach to watershed issues. 4, considering recommendation or receiving upcoming studies and reports.
Second.
Any discussion?
Question.
All will do.
Question has been called for. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It's unanimous. Any motions? None. In camera? None. Notices of motion? Pardon me?
We have
One added item, yes. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to put the following motion on the floor, that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee requests a staff report to be amended bylaw S600 respecting solid waste resource collection and disposal to include a section defining illegal dumping and providing the tools for enforcement of harsher penalties, including a reverse onus clause. So moved. Thank you for that, Councillor Hensby. So, in my investigations, I've spoken to CBRM and Lunenburg and some of the work that they're doing there, and they've had some really good results of going out and implementing heavy fines to the extent, and I think CBRM is $1,000 a bag for illegal fines, and an investigation taking place. The other unique thing that CBRM is doing is not necessarily our bylaw officers are doing. They have the cooperation of one of the police officers being designated to investigate these. And so that police officer, he or she, has the ability to implement either our bylaw or municipal or provincial law in the situation. Lunenburg doing something similar. So some really good results with that. And so that's what that motion is about, asking staff to investigate, communicate with CBRM, communicate with Lunenburg. CBRM also, I discovered, once the charge is relayed and the conviction has happened, they actually put the person's name out there to defer. So whether we can do that, I don't know. But I just saw the results they were getting, and I thought, man, it's time to do something like that. So, like that.
Councillor Hensby?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to second this motion, and I'd like to ask that staff for clarification on the reverse onus. Does that mean if you find a piece of identification in the trash and illegally dumped, that's the person's responsibility to clean it up? Because right now, as the policy says now, property owners help respond to cleaning it up, and that's not fair. And I think we should pull that out for perpetrators. But also, when we provide anybody
Is this a friendly amendment, do you think, or do you think it's an amendment?
It's not an amendment, but make sure that those things become a part of the process, because a lot of times you find receipts in garbage.
Yes.
Construction site, and you may track back the receipt, maybe it was a contract that was hired by a person doing a home renovation, and instead of taking it to the C&D, the transfer site processing, they find back where it dumped it. And so therefore, the question is, should be incumbent upon A, the person who takes up the permit, or B, the person who's identified the dumping.
So my question is, how do you want this put into the
I don't
motion?
think so, sure.
I don't think we can talk on it.
Wait.
I just want to make sure that those aspects are covered in here.
If I may, Mr. Chair, my understanding, they have knowledge and experience, and that's okay to answer that question when our staff speaks to both city area and
All right, and I certainly agree with Councillor Hensky on that, so. Further questions? Are you ready to call for question? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. And any additional items?
That was the only one, so we're on item 16.
Notice of motion, I think I sort of glossed over the added items just for the deputy. Public participation, which we've done. The next.
Brad, you want to say anything?
I'd like my driveway paid.
Please, no heckling of the committee. Date of the next meeting will be January 3rd, 2019. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Very good. Thank you for making my debut so exciting.
Hit the bag.
Yeah. No,